Here's the detailed script for Part 1, written specifically for an American audience, with a focus on African American social context. The text is formatted for AI voiceover reading, clear, emotional, and without any headers or special characters. Serve the champagne, Sophia, and try not to look so invisible. That is what my father-in-law James hissed at me while shoving a tray of crystal flutes into my hands. 5 minutes later, I stood in the shadows of the ballroom and watched my husband of 5 years, Marcus, stand on stage while his father announced his engagement to another woman. I was standing right there, holding their dirty dishes, wearing a polyester server uniform that smelled like stale detergent. They thought they had finally put me in my place. They thought I was just the help. What they did not know was that the black Amex card in my pocket had a limit higher than the entire value of their failing company. And that phone call I was about to make, it was going to turn their legacy into my property. My name is Sophia, and I am 32 years old. For 5 years, I have played the role of the supportive wife to a man who never once defended me. I let them believe I was just a logistics dispatcher working night shifts in a warehouse. I let them mock my off-the-rack clothes and my Honda Civic. I let them call me ghetto and unpolished because I did not come from their world of country clubs and generational debt. But tonight, the charade ends. Before I tell you how I bought their lives for pennies on the dollar, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to hide your power just to survive a toxic family. The night started with a demand, not a request. I had arrived at the St. Regis Hotel for the 40th anniversary gala of Legacy Motors, wearing a simple but elegant black dress. I had actually taken time with my hair, pulling it back into a sleek bun, hoping that for once, James would look at me with something other than disdain. I was wrong. As soon as I stepped into the foyer, James grabbed my arm. His grip was tight and painful. "What do you think you are doing walking in the front door?" Sophia James asked, looking around nervously, as if my presence alone would devalue the property. "We are short-staffed tonight. The catering company sent 2 fewer girls than I paid for. I need you in the back." I pulled my arm away. "James, I am your daughter-in-law. I am here as a guest. I am sitting at table 4 with Marcus." James laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Table 4 is for investors and people who matter, Sophia. You would not understand the conversation. Besides, Marcus needs to focus tonight. This event is make or break for the company. We do not need you embarrassing him with your lack of social graces. Now go to the kitchen. There is a uniform waiting for you. It fits your background better than that dress anyway." I looked at Marcus, who was standing right behind his father adjusting his silk tie. He saw everything. He heard everything. "Marcus, are you going to let him talk to me like that?" I asked. Marcus sighed and checked his watch, refusing to meet my eyes. "Sophia, just do it. Okay. Dad is really stressed. The company is in a bad spot. Just help out for tonight. Don't be selfish." Selfish. I was the one who paid our mortgage secretly for the last 6 months when Marcus said his bonus was delayed. I was the one who filled his gas tank when his cards were declined. But I said nothing. I walked to the kitchen and put on the uniform. It was tight in the arms and loose in the waist, and made me look exactly like what they wanted me to be. Invisible, servile, beneath them. I walked out into the ballroom with a tray of appetizers. The room was filled with Atlanta's black elite, doctors, lawyers, politicians, people who looked like me but looked through me. I was weaving through the crowd when I saw her. Tiffany, my brother-in-law's wife. She was the only white woman in the room, and she made sure everyone knew she was there. She was wearing a white sequined gown that cost more than my car, and she was laughing loudly at something a senator said. As I walked past her, she turned sharply. Her elbow knocked directly into my tray. The motion was too precise to be an accident. Red wine and shrimp cocktail sauce splashed all over the front of her pristine white dress. "Oh my God!" Tiffany screamed. The music stopped. The conversation died. Every eye in the room turned to us. "You clumsy idiot," Tiffany yelled, pointing a manicured finger in my face. "Look what you did. This is a Vera Wang. Do you have any idea how much this costs?" "Of course you don't. You probably bought that uniform at Goodwill." Tiffany. "I did not," I started to say. "Save it," she interrupted. "God." James was right. "You can't take the hood out of the girl, can you? Someone get this trash away from me and get me some club soda." I stood there, freezing. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. Not shame. Rage. Pure, cold rage. I looked for Marcus again. He was standing 10 feet away holding a glass of scotch. He looked at me, then he looked at Tiffany. Then he turned his back and started talking to a man in a gray suit. He abandoned me. Again. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please." James's voice boomed over the microphone. He was standing on the stage, beaming under the spotlight. He didn't even acknowledge the scene Tiffany had just caused. "Tonight we celebrate 40 years of legacy motors," James continued. "But we are also looking to the future. As many of you know, the automotive industry is changing. To survive, we must evolve. And to evolve, we must merge." I gripped the empty tray. A merger. Marcus had never mentioned a merger. "I am proud to announce," James said, gesturing to the side of the stage, "a strategic partnership that will save this company and secure our family's future for generations. And to seal this bond, I am thrilled to announce the engagement of my son Marcus to the beautiful and talented Vanessa King, daughter of King Automotive." The room erupted in applause. Vanessa walked onto the stage. She was tall, stunning, and the daughter of James's biggest rival. She walked over to Marcus, who had moved to the stage while I was being screamed at by Tiffany. Marcus took Vanessa's hand. He smiled. It was the same smile he gave me on our wedding day. I felt like the floor had opened up beneath me. We were not divorced. We were not even separated. I had made him breakfast this morning. I had ironed the shirt he was wearing right now. And here he was, holding another woman's hand, while his father sold him like a piece of livestock to save a dying company. James leaned into the microphone again. "We all make mistakes in our youth." He looked directly at me, standing in the back, in my stain-covered uniform. Marcus had a lapse in judgment a few years ago with a certain distraction. But tonight, he returns to his roots. He returns to excellence. He returns to where he belongs. The room laughed, a polite, cruel ripple of laughter. They thought I was the distraction. They thought I was the mistake. I placed the tray on the nearest table. The metal clattered loudly against the wood, but nobody noticed. They were too busy toasting the happy couple. I walked through the crowd. I did not run. I did not cry. I walked with the spine of a woman who built a $400 million logistics empire from a laptop in a basement. I reached the edge of the stage. Marcus saw me coming. His smile faltered. He looked terrified. He whispered something to Vanessa and tried to step back, but I was already there. I did not scream. I did not make a scene. I simply raised my left hand and pulled off my wedding band. It was a small, modest ring because Marcus said he couldn't afford a big one. I held it up so the stage lights caught the gold. Then I dropped it into a half-empty glass of champagne sitting on the edge of the stage. Plink. The sound was tiny, but to Marcus it must have sounded like a gunshot. "Congratulations, Marcus," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. "I hope she has better credit than you. You are going to need it." I turned around and walked out. I could feel James's eyes burning a hole in my back. I could hear Tiffany scoffing. I walked through the double doors past the valet stand and out into the cool Atlanta night air. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. I reached into the pocket of my apron and pulled out my secure work phone. The screen glowed in the darkness. I dialed a number I had memorized. It rang once. "Yes, Madam President," a voice answered. It was David, my chief financial officer. David, I said, staring up at the lighted windows of the ballroom where my husband was celebrating his betrayal. I want you to execute the acquisition of Legacy Motors' debt. All of it, ma'am, David asked. The commercial loans and the private notes. That is over $12 million. It is a risky buy. Their credit is garbage. I know, I said, watching the valet bring around my old Honda Civic. Buy it all, every single cent. I want to own the building, the inventory, the brand, and the chair James is sitting on. And David, yes ma'am, do it tonight. I want the foreclosure notice on James's desk before he finishes his morning coffee. I hung up the phone and got into my car. I looked in the rearview mirror. I was still wearing the server uniform. I looked ridiculous. But as I wiped a smudge of cocktail sauce off my collar, I smiled. They wanted a server. Tomorrow I was going to serve them something they would never forget. A total liquidation. The drive back to the apartment was a blur of streetlights and unshed tears. This wasn't really my home. It was a 2-bedroom condo in Buckhead that belonged to Legacy Motors. James allowed us to live there as part of Marcus's compensation package, a constant reminder that we owned nothing and owed them everything. The moment I walked through the door, the silence hit me harder than the noise of the gala. The air was stale, smelling of the expensive cologne Marcus wore, a scent I used to associate with love, but now only recognized as the smell of cowardice. I walked into the bedroom and pulled my old suitcase from the back of the closet. It was a battered Samsonite I had used since college, back when I was scrubbing floors to pay for my tuition. I started throwing things into it indiscriminately. My comfortable hoodies, my worn-out jeans, the few books that belonged to me and not to the aesthetic of the apartment. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a photo of Marcus smiling, a photo taken 3 years ago when I still believed in us. I swiped answer and put it on speaker, tossing a pair of sneakers into the bag. Sophia Marcus's voice filled the empty room. He sounded out of breath, and in the background I could hear the clinking of glasses and the murmur of the party I had just left. The celebration of his betrayal was still in full swing. "I'm packing, Marcus," I said, my voice flat. "Don't be dramatic." He sighed as if I were a child refusing to eat vegetables. "Look, I know tonight was intense. Dad can be blunt. But you have to look at the bigger picture." "The bigger picture?" I asked, stopping with a shirt in my hand. "You mean the picture where you hold hands with another woman while your wife clears the table?" "It is business, Sophia." He snapped, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You know the numbers. Legacy Motors is drowning. We are bleeding cash. Vanessa's father, Mr. King, offered a merger that saves us from bankruptcy. But the condition was a union, a marriage. It is a strategic alliance. It has nothing to do with love." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that seemed to annoy him. "So, I am just a line item on a spreadsheet that you decided to delete. You are making this about emotions when it is about survival," he said, his tone shifting to that patronizing cadence he used when explaining simple concepts to me. "Look, you are a great girl, Sophia. You are loyal. You work hard at the warehouse. But let's be real. You don't fit in this world. You hate the parties, you don't know the investors, and frankly, you don't bring anything to the table that can save the family legacy. Vanessa can." I gripped the edge of the dresser until my knuckles turned white. He was right. I didn't fit in his world. I owned a world 10 times bigger than his, but he was too blinded by his father's ego to see it. "I am not going to leave you high and dry," Marcus continued, his voice softening with fake generosity. "I talked to Dad. We are going to set you up. I can authorize a monthly allowance, $2,000 a month for the next year. It is more than you make at that dispatch job. You can get a nice little studio apartment, maybe go back to school. We will take care of you, Sophia. $2,000. He was offering me $2,000 a month while I was in the process of buying his father's $12 million debt. The irony was so thick I could taste it. "Keep your money." "Marcus," I said quietly. "Don't be proud," he scoffed. "You need us. You have always needed us. Without me, you are just a girl from the wrong side of Atlanta with a Honda Civic and a pile of student loans. Take the deal, move out quietly, don't cause a scene, and the checks will start arriving next week. I walked over to the window looking down at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my CFO was finalizing the paperwork that would give me the power to crush him. Marcus, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. You think you made a business decision tonight. You think you traded a liability for an asset, but you have no idea what you just threw away. Is that a threat? He laughed nervously. What are you going to do? Egg my car? No, I said. I am telling you the truth. You just lost the most valuable asset you ever had. And I am not talking about me as a wife. I am talking about your future. You are delusional, he muttered. Look, I have to go. Vanessa wants to introduce me to the senator. Pack your things. I want you gone by the weekend. He hung up. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a second, then tossed it onto the bed. Gone by the weekend, I planned to be gone within the hour. I zipped up the suitcase. I was reaching for my coat when I heard the front door code being punched in. Beep, 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 buzz. The lock clicked and the door swung open. A wave of expensive cloying perfume filled the hallway before she even stepped inside. Tiffany. She marched in like she owned the place, followed by two of her friends' clones with the same bleached hair and vacant expressions. They were giggling, holding bottles of wine they must have taken from the gala. "Oh, good, you are here," Tiffany said, stopping in the doorway of the bedroom. She looked me up and down with a sneer of pure disgust. "I told Marcus we couldn't wait until the weekend. I have a brand partnership with a closet organization company, and I need to measure this room tonight." "This is my apartment, Tiffany," I said, stepping between her and my suitcase. "Get out." "Not anymore, sweetie," she smiled, showing all her teeth. "It is a company apartment, and since you are no longer part of the company or the family, you are trespassing. Besides, this space is wasted on you. Look at this." She walked past me and opened the closet door, pulling out one of my flannel shirts with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "Ugh, polyester blends and sale rack denim?" She laughed, tossing the shirt onto the floor. "Girls, can you imagine I am going to turn this entire room into a walk-in glam station? The lighting in here is perfect for my unboxing videos." Her friends laughed, one of them picking up a framed photo of my grandmother from the dresser. "Cute," she said sarcastically. "Very rustic." "Put that down," I warned, stepping forward. Or what Tiffany stepped into my face. She was shorter than me, but her entitlement made her feel 10 feet tall. "You will braid my hair aggressively." "Face it, Sophia. You are evicted. Marcus gave me the code. He said I could start moving my things in tonight. He wants all traces of you gone before Vanessa comes over for brunch tomorrow. We can't have the future Mrs. King smelling your struggle." She shoved my suitcase. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was dismissive. It toppled over, spilling my clothes onto the floor. "Oops," she giggled. "Looks like you are ready to go. Let me help you speed this up." She grabbed a handful of my clothes from the floor and threw them toward the hallway. Her friends joined in, kicking my shoes toward the door like they were playing soccer with garbage. "Get out!" Tiffany screamed, her face suddenly twisting from amusement to ugly rage. "Get out of my family's house! You are a leech, a nobody! Go back to whatever gutter Marcus picked you out of." I stood there for a moment watching them. I could have fought back. I could have told them right then and there that I could buy this entire building and turn it into a parking lot. But I didn't. I needed them to feel victorious. I needed their arrogance to reach its peak so the fall would shatter them completely. I knelt down and stuffed my clothes back into the suitcase. I didn't fold them. I just jammed them in, fueled by a cold, silent adrenaline. I zipped the bag, stood up, and looked Tiffany dead in the eye. "Enjoy the closet, Tiffany," I said softly. "I hope it holds all your skeletons." I grabbed the handle of my suitcase and walked out. Behind me, I heard the door slam and the lock click, followed by the muffled sound of their laughter. I took the elevator down to the parking garage. The air was damp and heavy. It had started to rain. My 2015 Honda Civic sat in the corner looking small and battered next to the Range Rovers and BMWs of the other residents. I threw my suitcase into the back seat and climbed into the driver's seat. The engine sputtered before turning over a tired whining sound that echoed in the concrete cavern. As I drove out of the garage, the rain hammered against the windshield. I had no home. My husband had discarded me for a merger. My sister-in-law had thrown my clothes into the hallway. I had $2,000 in my checking account and a suitcase full of wrinkled clothes. To anyone watching, I was a woman who had lost everything. But as I merged onto the highway, driving through the blinding rain, I reached into the center console and pulled out the secure black phone. There was one new message from my legal team. Transaction complete. You are now the majority note holder of Legacy Motors. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. I turned on the windshield wipers, sweeping away the rain. I wasn't driving away from my life. I was driving toward my war room. The Honda Civic disappeared into the night carrying a billionaire who was done playing nice. The game had just begun. My rusted Honda Civic looked like a scar against the pristine white marble of the St. Regis private entrance. The rain was still hammering down, washing away the dirt of the day, but it could not wash away the memory of my clothes being thrown into the hallway. I pulled up to the gate that most people did not know existed. It was a discreet entrance tucked away from the main hotel lobby reserved for residents of the penthouses who valued their privacy above all else. I rolled down the window and pressed my thumb against the biometric scanner. The machine beeped once. "Welcome home, Ms. Sterling." The heavy iron gate swung open silently. I drove the rattling car into the underground sanctuary, parking it next to my other car. A matte black Aston Martin that I had not driven in 6 months because Marcus claimed it was too flashy for a dispatcher's wife. I turned off the engine and let the silence of the garage wash over me. For 5 years I had played a role. I had dimmed my light so my husband would not feel blinded. I had pretended that coupon clipping was a necessity and that a 2-bedroom condo was the height of luxury. But as I stepped out of the Honda and walked toward the private elevator bank, I felt the weight of that performance falling away. The elevator doors opened before I even pressed the button. I stepped inside and the camera scanned my face, automatically selecting the 45th floor. As the lift rose, leaving the ground level behind, I watched the numbers climb. Floor 10, floor 20, floor 30. With every passing floor, I stood a little taller. By the time the doors opened onto the private foyer of the penthouse, I was no longer Sophia, the rejected wife. I was Sophia Sterling, the founder and CEO of Apex Logistics Solutions. I walked into the living room. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline. The city looked like a circuit board of golden lights from up here. The air inside smelled of white tea and fig, a stark contrast to the stale cologne and desperation of the condo I had just left. I kicked off my wet sneakers, leaving them on the imported Italian marble. I walked straight to the wet bar and poured myself a glass of vintage whiskey. Not the cheap blend Marcus kept in the cupboard, but a single malt that cost more than his monthly salary. I took a sip and let the burn settle my nerves. Then I walked into my office. This room was the nerve center of my life. 3 large monitors sat on a glass desk humming with data. I sat down in my leather chair and placed my palm on the desk surface. The screens woke up instantly. Streams of data flooded the monitors. Real-time tracking of 3,000 shipping containers moving across the Atlantic. A fleet of 500 trucks navigating the highways of the Midwest. A ticker showing the private valuation of Apex Logistics rising steadily to $450 million. I watched the blue dots moving on the global map. Each dot represented a shipment I controlled. Each line represented a contract I had negotiated. I closed my eyes, and a memory flashed through my mind. It was from 2 years ago. I was sitting at the kitchen table in the condo, working on my laptop coding the routing algorithm that would eventually save my company 20% in fuel costs. James had walked in looking for Marcus. He had glanced at my screen, seeing only lines of code he did not understand. Playing video games, Sophia, James had asked with a sneer. You really should find a hobby that contributes to this family. Maybe you could learn to cook something other than casserole. You just do not have the head for business. It is a man's game, sweetie. Leave the thinking to Marcus and me. I opened my eyes and looked at the screens. Leave the thinking to them. That was the joke of the century. While James was busy micromanaging the color of the napkins for the gala, I was busy disrupting the entire North American supply chain. While Marcus was struggling to close a deal with a local dealership, I was signing contracts with Amazon and Walmart. They saw a woman in a hoodie and assumed I was slow. They never bothered to ask what I was building in the silence. My secure line rang. It was a sharp digital trill that cut through the room. I tapped the speaker button. David, are we ready? I asked. David's voice came through clear and professional. We are ready, Sophia. I have the final dossier on Legacy Motors. It is worse than we thought. How bad? I asked, leaning back in my chair. They are hemorrhaging cash. David explained. James has been cooking the books to hide the losses from the board. He has been using the company credit line to pay for personal expenses. The gala tonight. That cost $200,000, and he put it on the corporate account as marketing expenses. But here's the kicker. They have a balloon payment due on their primary loan, $12 million. It matures tomorrow at noon. And they do not have it, I asked, knowing the answer. They do not even have 12,000, let alone 12 million, David said. The bank is panicking. They want to offload the toxic debt before the quarter ends. They are willing to sell the note for 20 cents on the dollar just to get it off their books. I swirled the whiskey in my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. So if I buy the note, I become their primary creditor. Exactly, David said. You will own the debt, which means if they miss the payment at noon tomorrow, which they absolutely will, you have the right to foreclose on everything. The inventory, the brand, the factory. And thanks to a clause James signed in arrogance, you can even go after the personal assets of the guarantors. Who are the guarantors? I asked. James and Marcus, David replied. They put up everything, James's estate, Marcus's future trust, even the condo you were living in. I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just cornered its prey. They had spent years telling me I was worthless. They had treated me like a squatter in their lives. And all the while they were living on borrowed time and borrowed money, signing away their futures because they were too arrogant to read the fine print. Buy it, I said softly. Are you sure? David asked, his voice hesitant for the first time. This is a hostile takeover, Sophia. Once we execute this, there is no going back. You will be destroying your husband's family business. It is not his business anymore, David, I said, looking at the map of my empire on the screen. It is a sinking ship. I am just deciding who gets on the lifeboats. Very well, David said. I need the name of the purchasing entity. We cannot use Apex Logistics. If they see your name on the paperwork before the ink is dry, they might try to file an injunction. We need a shell company. I thought about Tiffany throwing my clothes into the hall. I thought about James laughing at me on the stage. I thought about Marcus holding Vanessa's hand. Call it Nemesis Holdings, I said. Nemesis, David repeated. Fitting. I am sending the digital contract to your screen now. It just needs your biometric signature. A document appeared on the center monitor. It was thick with legal jargon, but the numbers were clear. $12 million of debt, purchased for $2.4 million. It was pocket change for me. But for them, it was the end of the world. I reached out and placed my hand on the screen. The scanner read my palm print. A green light flashed. Transaction approved. It was done. I sat back in the chair and looked out at the city. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing a sliver of the moon. Tomorrow morning, James would wake up thinking he was the king of the automotive world. He would drink his coffee in his mansion and check the stock market. He would have no idea that the woman he sent to the kitchen to wash dishes now owned the cup he was drinking from. I picked up my phone and saw a notification from Instagram. It was Tiffany. She had posted a story of her new closet, my old bedroom filled with her sequined dresses. The caption read, "Finally getting rid of the trash-making room for class." I double-tapped the photo not to like it, but to zoom in. In the corner of the frame, I could see a small red box on the shelf. It was the only thing I had left behind. A jewelry box my grandmother gave me. It was empty, of course, because I kept my real jewelry in the hotel safe. But seeing it there, surrounded by Tiffany's gaudy things, sparked a final burst of resolve. "Enjoy the room, Tiffany," I whispered to the empty office. "Because by this time tomorrow, you will be lucky if you have a roof over your head at all." I turned off the monitors, plunging the room back into darkness. I finished my whiskey and walked toward the master bedroom. For the first time in 5 years, I was going to sleep in a bed that I bought in a home that I owned, without a single man telling me I wasn't good enough. The girl from the warehouse was gone, the billionaire had arrived, and she was coming to collect. Here is the detailed script for Part 4. The Nightmare Begins. The content is written in English formatted specifically for AI voiceover, with a continuous flow, no headers, and focused on emotional delivery. The sun rose over Atlanta, casting a golden glow on the sprawling estate that James liked to call his ancestral home, even though he had purchased it in the 90s, with a loan he had refinanced 3 times. From the 45th floor of the St. Regis, I watched the city wake up, but my mind was focused entirely on that mansion in Buckhead. I knew exactly what was happening there. It was a ritual I had witnessed 100 times. The morning after a gala was always a victory lap for the Sterling family. They would be sitting on the limestone terrace overlooking the pool, eating a breakfast prepared by a private chef they could not afford, and congratulating themselves on their own brilliance. I imagined James sitting at the head of the table wearing his silk robe, holding a glass of fresh orange juice mixed with expensive champagne. He would be reading the society pages looking for his own name, while Marcus and Vanessa sat nearby, holding hands and planning a wedding funded by imaginary money. They were likely laughing about me. They were probably retelling the story of the crazy waitress who threw a tantrum and walked out. To them, I was already a memory, a stain they had scrubbed out of their perfect picture. They had no idea that while they were sleeping, I had legally acquired the ground beneath their feet. At 9 o'clock sharp, the first domino fell. I had instructed the bank's legal team to make the call the moment business hours began. I wasn't there to see it, but I knew the script by heart. The phone in James's study would ring. It was the private line, the one reserved for bankers and high-level investors. James would answer it with that pompous baritone voice, expecting a congratulatory call about the merger or the engagement. Instead, he heard the voice of Mr. Henderson, the senior loan officer at First City Bank. I had met Henderson once years ago when I was delivering documents for Marcus. He was a cold, efficient man who hated risk, Mr. Sterling Henderson would say. "I am calling to inform you that as of midnight last night, First City Bank has divested its interest in all Legacy Motors debt obligations. Your commercial loans and personal guarantees have been sold to a private equity firm." I could picture James frowning, the confusion clouding his arrogance. "Sold? What do you mean sold?" "We have a relationship, Henderson. I have banked with you for 30 years. Who holds the paper now?" "The firm is called Nemesis Holdings," Henderson would reply. "And Mr. Sterling, you should know that the terms of the sale were absolute. The new note holder has declined to extend the grace period. The balloon payment of $12 million is due immediately. Good luck, James." Click. That was the moment the nightmare began. The silence on the terrace would have been broken by the sound of James slamming the phone down so hard it cracked the base. He would storm out onto the patio, his face a mask of purple rage. Marcus James would scream, startling Vanessa, who was likely admiring her ring in the sunlight. "Get on the phone now! The bank sold us out. Some vulture capital firm bought the debt and they want the full 12 million today." Marcus would drop his fork, his face going pale. "That is impossible, Dad. We have a 30-day extension. We agreed on it last week. It is gone." James would roar, sweeping the breakfast dishes off the table. The crash of fine china on the stone patio was the sound of their reality shattering. "Nemesis Holdings owns us now. Fix it, Marcus. Call the bridge lenders. Call the investors. Get me that money or we lose everything." For the next hour, the Sterling mansion turned into a war room of desperation. Marcus spent the morning pacing the pool deck, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice rising an octave with every rejection. What he did not know was that I had spent the entire night erecting a financial wall around them. I had flagged their credit rating in the national database. I had whispered to the key private lenders in Atlanta that Legacy Motors was under investigation for fraud. In the tight-knit world of high finance, bad news travels faster than light. "Hey, Bill, it is Marcus," I imagined him saying, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, great party last night. Hey, listen, we have a minor cash flow hiccup. Just a timing issue with the merger. I need a bridge loan, 5 million, just for 48 hours. I knew exactly what Bill would say because Bill was one of my clients. "Sorry, Marcus. I heard about the debt sale. It is too risky. I can't touch it." Call after call. Rejection after rejection. Every friend they thought they had suddenly had a meeting to go to. Every favor they thought they were owed suddenly expired. They were discovering the hard truth about their world. It was not built on loyalty, it was built on solvency. And without money, the Sterling name was just a word. While the men were drowning in a sea of red ink, Tiffany was floating in a bubble of delusion. She was sitting on a lounge chair a few feet away, completely oblivious to the panic. She had her ring light set up and she was live streaming to her 50,000 followers. "Hey guys," Tiffany chirped into her phone, angling her hand so the sunlight hit the diamond on Vanessa's finger. "I am here with the future Mrs. Sterling. Look at this rock. It is absolutely blinding. We are just recovering from the most insane gala last night. The haters tried to ruin it, but we are literally glowing today. Blessed, Sterling legacy. Rich life." She was zooming in on the ring, smiling that vacant plastic smile, while 5 feet away, her father-in-law was clutching his chest and gasping for air. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. She was broadcasting their wealth at the exact moment it was evaporating. She was tagging luxury brands in a video filmed in a house that was technically already in foreclosure. James looked over at her, his eyes bulging. Tiffany put that phone away. "We are in a crisis." But she just giggled, waving him off. "Oh, Dad, stop stressing. The merger will fix everything. You guys are so dramatic." She didn't get it. None of them did. They thought this was just a bad business day. They thought they could charm or bully their way out of it like they always had. They didn't realize this was an execution. Then came the final blow. My laptop on the desk in the penthouse pinged. The email had been delivered. I watched the tracking pixel. 1 minute later it was opened. Back at the mansion, James's phone buzzed with a priority notification. He looked down at the screen. The subject line read simply, "Notice of default and immediate demand for payment." The sender was legal at nemesisholdings.com. James's hands shook as he read the text aloud, his voice trembling with a fear he had never known. To the board of Legacy Motors, this email serves as formal notice that you are in default of your primary loan obligations. Nemesis Holdings hereby exercises its right to accelerate the debt. The total amount of $12,400,000 is due immediately. Marcus ran over, reading over his father's shoulder. "Who are these people, Dad? We can sue them. We can stall them." "Keep reading." James whispered, his face turning gray. There was a second paragraph, a paragraph I had written myself. However, the email continued, "The principal of Nemesis Holdings is willing to discuss a structured surrender of assets in lieu of immediate legal action. A meeting has been scheduled for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning at our offices. Attendance by all board members, including Mr. James Sterling and Mr. Marcus Sterling, is mandatory. Failure to appear will result in the immediate seizure of the corporate headquarters and the personal residence currently used as collateral. Seizure. Marcus choked out. They can't take the house, Dad. Mom loves this house. They can take it all, James said, sinking into a chair. We signed the guarantees, Marcus. We signed everything. Tiffany finally lowered her phone, the ring light reflecting in her confused eyes. Wait, does this mean we can't go shopping for the bridal party gifts today? My card got declined at Starbucks this morning, but I thought it was just a glitch. It wasn't a glitch, Tiffany, Marcus screamed, snapping at her for the first time in his life. The accounts are frozen, we are broke. Do you understand we are broke? Silence descended on the terrace. The birds were still singing, the fountain was still splashing, but the air had changed. The invincibility that had shielded the Sterling family for decades had shattered. They were small, they were frightened, and for the first time they were completely powerless. James looked at the phone again, staring at the name Nemesis. Who is doing this? He whispered. Who hates us this much? I took a sip of my tea in the penthouse and watched the sun climb higher in the sky. They would spend the next 24 hours in agony trying to guess the identity of their executioner. They would suspect their rivals. They would suspect the bank. They would suspect everyone except the woman they had forced to wear a polyester uniform and serve them crab cakes. I checked my schedule for tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Meeting with Legacy Motors Board. I needed to pick out an outfit. Something sharp, something powerful, something that said, I am not the help, I am the boss. The nightmare had officially begun, and I was going to enjoy every single second of their terror. The lobby of the Nemesis Holdings building was designed to make people feel small. It was a cavern of gray slate and brushed steel with a ceiling that soared 3 stories high. There were no comfortable chairs, just a single concrete bench that looked more like an art installation than furniture. I sat in my private observation room on the 30th floor, watching the security feed on a high-definition monitor. It was 10 minutes past 9. James and Marcus had been sitting on that concrete bench for 2 hours. I zoomed in on James's face. The composure he had worn at the gala was gone. He was sweating. He kept checking his platinum watch, tapping the crystal face, as if the battery had died. Every time the elevator doors opened, he jumped to his feet, fixing his tie and putting on a fake smile only to slump back down when a random employee walked out, ignoring him completely. They were learning their first lesson. In my world, time is currency, and they were currently bankrupt. I pressed the intercom button connecting me to the receptionist downstairs. Sarah, send them up now. Put them in Conference Room B. Conference Room B was special. It was the only room on the executive floor with a one-way mirror. I walked from my office to the darkened observation booth behind the mirror. I sat down in a leather chair holding a tablet that controlled the room's environment. I lowered the temperature in the conference room by 5 degrees, just enough to make them uncomfortable, just enough to make them shiver. James and Marcus walked in. They looked around nervously. The room was stark. A long black table, no water pitchers, no notepads, just cold corporate silence. Where's the chairman? James asked the empty room, his voice echoing slightly. This is unprofessional. We have been waiting since 9 o'clock. The door opened. It was not me who walked in. It was David. I had chosen David for this meeting for a very specific reason. 6 months ago, I had driven David to the Legacy Motors headquarters to pick up some paperwork Marcus had forgotten. David was dressed casually that day, wearing a hoodie and jeans. We were standing in the parking lot when James pulled up in his Mercedes. James had rolled down his window and tossed his keys at David, hitting him in the chest. "Park it, boy," James had said. "And do not scratch it. I know how you people drive." David was my chief financial officer. He held a dual degree from Wharton and London School of Economics. But James only saw a black man in a hoodie and assumed he was a valet. Now, watching through the glass, I saw James's eyes widen. David walked in wearing a 3-piece bespoke suit that cost more than James's car. His dreadlocks were tied back neatly, and he carried a single thin folder. He did not offer his hand. He sat down at the head of the table and opened the folder. "Good morning, gentlemen," David said, his voice smooth and cold. "I am David Okonjo, Vice President of Acquisitions for Nemesis Holdings. You are late." "We have been in the lobby for 2 hours," James sputtered, slamming his hand on the table. "Your receptionist refused to let us up, and I know you. I have seen you before." "Yes," David said, not looking up from the papers. "You threw your car keys at me in a parking lot last spring. You called me lazy. You assumed I was hired help." James froze. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Marcus looked between them, confused. "Dad." "You know him?" Marcus asked. "I assure you, Mr. Sterling," David continued, his eyes locking onto James, "I am not lazy. And today I am the only thing standing between your company and a padlocked gate." James swallowed hard. He adjusted his collar, which suddenly seemed too tight. "Look, Mr. Okonjo, that was a misunderstanding. A case of mistaken identity. I have the utmost respect for your position. We are here to discuss the debt. We just need a simple extension. 30 days. The merger with King Automotive is imminent. Once that closes, we can pay you in full plus interest." David leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. I was proud of him. He had mastered the art of silence. He let James talk until the silence became unbearable. "There is no merger," David said simply. Marcus stood up. "Of course there is. I am marrying Vanessa King. We ran a risk assessment on King Automotive." David lied smoothly. "They are currently under investigation by the SEC for inflating their assets. A merger with them would devalue our collateral. We do not approve it." "You do not approve it?" James stood up, his face turning purple. "It is my company. I am the chairman." "Not anymore," David said. "You are a debtor in default. You do not make decisions. You make payments. And since you cannot make the payment due today, we are moving to seizure." "No, please." Marcus pleaded, his arrogance dissolving into panic. "There has to be another way. We can restructure. We can cut costs." "Fine," David said, as if he were bored. "We can offer a forbearance agreement. 7 days. But the terms are non-negotiable." "Anything," James said. "We will sign anything." David slid a single sheet of paper across the black table. "Condition 1. We require additional collateral. The debt exceeds the value of the company assets. We need personal guarantees. Specifically, the deed to the property at 4500 Tuxedo Road." "The mansion," James whispered. "That is my home. My wife has lived there for 30 years. It is in a trust." "We know," David said. "Break the trust. Sign over the deed. Or we foreclose on the factory by 5 p.m. today." James slumped in his chair, defeated. He nodded slowly. "Condition 2. David continued. Operational austerity. We are cutting executive compensation by 30% effective immediately. No bonuses. No company cars. No expense accounts. And we are auditing the last 5 years of financials. If we find $1 out of place, we prosecute." Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. He was realizing that his life of country clubs and easy money was over. I watched them squirm. It was delicious. But it was not enough. I needed to twist the knife personally. I pulled out my phone. I saw Marcus on the other side of the glass, rubbing his temples, his phone sitting on the table in front of him. I typed a message. "Have you signed the divorce papers yet? Or are you too busy saving the empire?" I hit send. Inside the room, Marcus's phone buzzed loudly against the glass table. The vibration made everyone jump. Marcus looked at the screen. I saw his jaw clench. He looked annoyed. Not guilty, not sad, annoyed. He picked up the phone and typed furiously under the table while David was explaining the foreclosure process to his father. My phone buzzed. I looked at the message from Marcus. "Do not bother me right now, Sophia. I am in the middle of a multi-million-dollar negotiation. I am saving this family. Something you would know nothing about. Go find a job washing dishes. We are not sending you any money this month. I laughed out loud in the empty observation room. The sound bounced off the walls. He was sitting 10 feet away from me, begging my employee for mercy, selling his father's house to pay a debt to me, and he still thought he was better than me. He still thought he was the hero of the story. I looked through the glass one last time. James was shaking as he signed the document, putting his mansion up as collateral. Marcus was looking at his reflection in the darkened window, fixing his hair, unaware that I was on the other side, staring right back at him. David took the signed papers. "Thank you, gentlemen. You have 7 days to come up with $12 million. If you fail, the locks change on the house and the factory simultaneously. I suggest you start packing." David stood up and walked out, leaving them alone in the cold silence. I waited until they left the building. I watched them walk to their car, arguing the whole way. James was yelling at Marcus. Marcus was yelling at the sky. I walked out of the observation room and met David in the hallway. He handed me the deed to the Sterling mansion. "They signed," David said, though James looked like he was having a stroke. "Good work, David," I said, taking the paper. I looked at the address on the deed. It was the house where they had held the gala, the house where I was forced to wear a uniform, the house where Tiffany was currently filming her makeup tutorials. It was my house now. I looked at Marcus's text message one more time. "Go find a job washing dishes." I put the phone in my pocket. I did not need to wash dishes. I owned the kitchen. And in 7 days, I was going to turn off the water. The evening air inside La Lumiere was scented with truffles and old money. It was the most exclusive French restaurant in Atlanta, the kind of place where reservations were inherited rather than booked. I sat at table 1, a secluded booth, velvet roped off from the main dining room, swirling a glass of Pinot Noir that cost more than my father-in-law's monthly mortgage payment. I needed this moment of silence. After watching James and Marcus squirm in the conference room earlier that day, I wanted to decompress in a space that was entirely mine. And I mean that literally. I had purchased La Lumiere 3 years ago through a holding company because I grew tired of restaurants telling me they were fully booked when I tried to make reservations for my husband's birthday. Now I owned the table, the wine cellar, and the building. I was just raising the glass to my lips, enjoying the hum of quiet conversation, when a shrill, piercing voice cut through the elegant atmosphere like a serrated knife. "Oh my God, you guys look... I literally cannot believe my eyes." I froze. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. That voice haunted my nightmares. Tiffany. I watched her reflection in the darkened window. She was storming through the main dining room, holding her phone up on a selfie stick, live streaming to her followers. She was wearing a dress that was too loud for the setting, something neon and desperate, and she was ignoring the host who was trying to intercept her. She marched straight toward my table, the camera lens focused directly on my face. "Guys, remember the gold digger I told you about, the one who ruined my engagement party? Look! She is here!" Tiffany stopped right at the edge of my booth, looming over me. She shoved the phone into my face. I could see the comments scrolling by on her screen. "Say hi to the internet," Sophia Tiffany chirped, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Everyone is wondering how you can afford to eat here. Did you find a sugar daddy already? Or are you just sitting here hoping some rich grandpa will take pity on you and buy you a salad?" I slowly placed my wine glass down on the white tablecloth. I did not look at the camera. I looked at her. "Tiffany, you are disturbing the other guests," I said calmly. "Put the phone away." "Oh, she is shy now." Tiffany laughed, spinning the camera to face herself. "She wants me to put the phone away because she doesn't want Marcus to see her prowling for his replacement. It has been, 24 hours? And you are already out here trying to trap another man. It is pathetic, honestly." She leaned in closer, whispering conspiratorially to her audience. "See, guys, this is what happens when you don't have your own money. You have to fake it. She probably ordered that water and has been nursing it for 3 hours just to take a picture for social media." The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. She was accusing me of faking wealth while wearing a dress bought with stolen company funds. She was mocking me for being broke while her family's empire was 7 days away from total collapse. I signaled Henri, the general manager, with a single subtle lift of my index finger. Henri had been watching from the shadows, looking like he was about to have a heart attack. He rushed over immediately, 2 large security guards trailing behind him. Tiffany didn't even notice them. She was too busy reading her comments. Someone said, "You look like the help." Tiffany shrieked with laughter. "Oh my God, you guys are savage." But it is true, she used to wear a polyester uniform. Maybe she's applying for a job here. Is that it, Sophia? Are you asking for an application? Madame Henri's voice was sharp, cutting through her laughter. Tiffany spun around, flipping her hair. She looked at Henri and smiled flirtatiously. "Oh, hi. Are you the manager? I am Tiffany Sterling. I am a huge influencer in Atlanta. I am actually doing you a favor by showing your restaurant to my followers. You are welcome. But we have a problem. This woman here. She is harassing me. And honestly, having someone like her in here really lowers the vibe. My followers are saying she looks low budget. You should probably ask her to leave." She pointed at me, looking triumphant. She expected Henri to bow to her to acknowledge the Sterling name to kick out the unwanted ex-wife. Henri did not look at Tiffany. He stepped past her and bowed deeply to me. "Madame Sterling," Henri said, his voice trembling with apology. "I am mortified. I did not realize this individual had bypassed the host stand. Shall I have the police called, or would you prefer we handle this internally?" Tiffany's smile faltered. "Wait, what? Why are you bowing to her? I just told you she is a nobody. I am the Sterling. She is the ex. She is trespassing." Henri turned to Tiffany, his face transformed from subservient to icy disdain. "The only person trespassing here is you, mademoiselle. You are disturbing the owner." Tiffany blinked. The phone in her hand lowered slightly. "The owner? What are you talking about? I know the owner. It is some investment group." Henri drew himself up to his full height. "You are standing in front of the investment group," he said, gesturing to me. "Madame Sophia Sterling owns La Lumière. She owns this building, she owns the chair you are leaning on, and she certainly owns the wine she is drinking." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the livestream comments must have frozen. Tiffany looked at me, her eyes wide, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. That is a lie," she stammered. "She works at a warehouse. She drives a Honda." I finally spoke. I picked up my wine glass again and took a slow sip. "I drive a Honda because I choose to, Tiffany. Just like I chose not to have you arrested for trespassing 5 minutes ago. But my patience has expired." Tiffany looked at her phone. The comments were scrolling faster now. People were asking if it was true. People were laughing at her. Panic set in. She needed to save face. She needed to spin this. "Oh my God, you guys!" She screamed into the phone, her face twisting into a mask of malicious fabrication. "Do you hear this? She is lying. Or worse, she is sleeping with the owner. That is it. She is the mistress. She seduced some old man to buy this place for her. That is why she left Marcus. She has been cheating on him the whole time." She pointed the camera at me again, her voice rising to a shriek. "You are disgusting, Sophia. You tricked everyone. You are just a high-class escort." Henri nodded to the security guards. "Remove her, now, and ban her for life." The guards stepped forward, grabbing Tiffany by her elbows. "Get off me! Do you know who I am?" Tiffany screamed as they dragged her backward. "My father-in-law is James Sterling. We are going to sue this place. I will ruin you." She was still screaming as they hauled her through the dining room. I watched her go, watched the patrons staring in shock, watched the red light of her phone still blinking, broadcasting her humiliation to the world. When the doors finally closed behind her, Henri looked at me, his face pale. "Madame, I am so sorry. I will compel the staff to sign non-disclosure agreements immediately regarding the incident." It is fine, Henri, I said, setting down my glass. Actually, it is better than fine. It is actionable. I pulled out my secure phone. I opened the folder marked Legacy Motors Audit. I had been saving this for later, but Tiffany had just forced my hand. I dialed the number for my lead forensic accountant. Sarah, I said when she answered. I need you to pull the trigger on the IRS notification regarding Tiffany Sterling. You want to file the report? Sarah asked. I want to fast-track it. I said, my voice cold. I just watched her live stream. She is wearing the Valentino dress that shows up on the company ledger as office supplies. And she just publicly claimed to be a representative of the Sterling family while committing slander. I paused, looking at the empty space where Tiffany had stood. She accused me of having a sugar daddy. Let's show the world who is actually spending other people's money. Send the entire file to the tax fraud division. And Sarah, yes, Sophia. Make sure the press gets wind of the investigation. If she wants to be famous, let's make her famous. I hung up the phone. I picked up my fork and took a bite of the truffle risotto. It was delicious. The taste of victory always is. Tiffany thought she had exposed me. All she had done was hand me the weapon to bury her. The high-definition monitors in my penthouse painted the room in a cool blue light as I sat back in my leather chair, swirling a glass of sparkling water. I was watching a silent movie starring the woman who had stolen my husband, and the stage was my father-in-law's private office. While James and Marcus were running around the city, trying to beg for loans to pay off Nemesis Holdings, they had left the fox alone in the henhouse. On the screen, Vanessa King was moving with a precision that betrayed her true nature. To the world, she was the pampered daughter of a rival automotive tycoon, a woman who spent her days shopping and planning charity luncheons. But as I watched her slip on a pair of latex gloves and slide a sleek encrypted flash drive into James's personal computer, I saw her for what she really was: a corporate spy. A predator sent by her father to finish off the wounded animal that was Legacy Motors. They never suspected her. Why would they? James was too blinded by the prestige of her last name, and Marcus was too distracted by her beauty. They thought they were marrying into a dynasty. They did not realize they were inviting in a parasite. But I knew. I had known for a long time. 3 years ago, when James fired the professional cleaning crew to cut costs, he had ordered me to scrub the executive floors on weekends. He thought he was humiliating me, forcing his son's wife to empty trash bins and polish mahogany desks. He thought he was teaching me my place. He did not know that he was giving a software engineer unsupervised access to his entire infrastructure. While I dusted the shelves, I installed micro cameras in the smoke detectors. While I vacuumed under the desks, I hardwired a back door into the mainframe. I saw everything. I heard everything. And tonight, I was watching the final act of their stupidity. Vanessa typed furiously on the keyboard, bypassing the passwords James thought were secure. She was looking for one thing: Project Phoenix. Project Phoenix was the only asset Legacy Motors had left that was worth anything. It was a revolutionary electric motor design that James claimed would change the industry. It was the collateral for their loans, the hope for their future, and the bait that had lured Vanessa's father into this fake merger. I watched her eyes scan the file directory. She found it. A folder labeled Phoenix Schematics Top Secret. A cruel smile spread across her face. It was not the smile of a loving fiancé. It was the smile of a thief who had just cracked the safe. She dragged the files onto her drive. The progress bar on the screen moved slowly. I could have stopped her. I could have locked the system remotely with a single keystroke. I could have triggered the silent alarm and had the police waiting for her in the driveway. But I did nothing. I simply watched and took a sip of my water. Because Vanessa was stealing a ghost. 6 months ago, when I realized Marcus was drifting away and James was cooking the books, I accessed the Project Phoenix files. I saw the original designs. They were good. They were efficient. So I deleted them. In their place, I wrote a new code. I created a set of blueprints that looked identical to the originals on the surface. The geometry was the same. The specs looked impressive. But deep within the thermal regulation subroutines, I introduced a fatal flaw. A mathematical error so subtle that no simulation would catch it until the prototype was built and pushed to maximum RPM. When that engine hit redline, it would not just fail, it would explode. It would be a catastrophic thermal event that would burn down any test facility it was housed in. I called it the poison apple, and Vanessa was currently taking a massive bite. The download completed. Vanessa pulled the drive out and slipped it into her diamond-encrusted clutch. She peeled off the gloves and checked her reflection in the dark monitor, smoothing her hair. She looked perfect, innocent, loyal. Just then, the office door opened. I adjusted the volume on my feed. Marcus walked in. He looked exhausted. His tie was loosened and his eyes were red from stress. He had spent the day being rejected by every bank in Atlanta thanks to me. When he saw Vanessa standing by his father's desk, his face softened. He looked at her like she was the only life raft in a stormy ocean. "Vanessa," he said, rushing over to her, "I am so sorry I left you alone. It has been a nightmare. The banks are freezing everything. That company Nemesis Holdings is squeezing us to death." Vanessa wrapped her arms around his neck. I watched her hide the clutch behind Marcus's back. Her voice changed instantly, shifting from cold calculation to breathless concern. "Oh, Marcus, baby, do not worry," she cooed, stroking his hair. "I was just waiting for you. I was praying that everything would work out." "I don't know what to do," Marcus confessed, burying his face in her neck. "If we don't come up with $12 million by next week, we lose it all. My dad is talking about selling the house. I might lose my job." "I have nothing, Vanessa. You have me," she whispered. "And you have our future." She pulled back and looked him in the eyes. The acting was Oscar-worthy. "I spoke to my father, Marcus. He is so excited about the merger. He believes in Project Phoenix. He believes in you. Once we get these designs to his engineers, he is going to infuse the capital you need. We are going to save Legacy Motors together." Marcus looked at her with pure adoration. He had no idea that the woman holding him was planning to hand those designs to her father so they could patent them first and sue Legacy Motors into oblivion. He had no idea that she was not there to save the company, she was there to strip it for parts. "You are amazing," Marcus said. "I don't know what I would do without you." Sophia never understood this pressure. She never supported me like this. I laughed softly in my penthouse. Support him, I was the one who kept the lights on. And now I was the one who was going to let him blow himself up. "I have to go, baby," Vanessa said, kissing him on the cheek. "I need to get home and prepare for the engagement party. My father wants to meet early tomorrow to discuss the integration." She was lying. She was going to meet her father to hand over the stolen drive. "Go," Marcus said. "I will stay here and try to figure out the finances." "I love you, Vanessa." "I love you too," she replied. She walked out of the office. As soon as she was in the hallway, the loving expression vanished. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message. I zoomed in on the text. "Got the package. Sending it to the lab tonight. Legacy is dead." She hit send. Back in the office, Marcus sat down in his father's chair. He looked at the computer screen, unaware that it had just been raped of its data. He put his head in his hands and sighed. I turned off the monitor. "Go ahead, Vanessa. Run to your daddy. Build that engine. Put your family's name on it. Because when that prototype detonates, it is not just going to destroy a machine. It is going to destroy the King automotive reputation forever. You wanted to steal my husband's legacy. You can have it. I hope you like fireworks." The morning sun did not bring light to the offices of Legacy Motors. It brought fire. The opening bell on Wall Street had rung only 30 minutes ago, but the stock was already in free fall. It started with a leak. A simple anonymous tip to a financial blog mentioning that the company's primary debt had been sold to a hostile firm and that the CFO's daughter-in-law was under IRS investigation for embezzlement. The market reacted with the brutality of a shark smelling blood in the water. I sat in the back of my chauffeured car watching the live ticker on my tablet. LGM down 12%. LGM down 20%. Trading halted due to volatility. Trading resumed. LGM down 35%. It was a massacre. The wealth that James had spent 40 years accumulating was evaporating in real time. Every tick downward was another $1 million wiped off his net worth. But the chaos was not just digital. At the manufacturing plant on the south side of the city, the silence was deafening. I had my sources on the ground. The union rep, a man named Ernest, who I had helped with legal fees years ago, had given the signal. The workers knew the company was drowning. They knew their pension fund had been raided to pay for James's country club memberships, so they stopped the line. The conveyor belts halted. The welding robots powered down. 300 workers walked out onto the asphalt holding signs that read, "Fair pay for honest work." Without product moving, they could not ship orders. Without shipping orders, they could not invoice. It was a death spiral, and I had cut the brakes. In the executive suite, James was trying to shout orders, but his voice was being drowned out by the ringing of telephones. Every line was lit up. Suppliers demanding payment. Dealerships canceling orders. Investors threatening lawsuits. James stood by the window, watching the news crews setting up cameras at the front gate. He turned to scream at his secretary to close the blinds, but the words never came out. He grasped his left arm. His face went ashen. He collapsed onto the plush oriental rug that he had bought with company funds. It was a mild heart attack, brought on by the crushing weight of consequences. As the paramedics wheeled him out past the crying secretaries and the panicked junior executives, he looked small. The lion of industry was just an old man with high cholesterol and bad credit. Marcus was left alone to captain the sinking ship. He was not built for crisis. He was built for golf courses and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. He watched his father being loaded into the ambulance, and then he did what he always did. He looked for someone to blame. I was standing in the VIP room of Van Cleef and Arpels when my phone vibrated. I was trying on a necklace, a cascade of sapphires that matched the mood of my victory. I saw Marcus's name on the screen. I signaled to the sales associate to give me a moment and answered. "This is Sophia." "You did this," Marcus screamed. His voice was raw, cracking with hysteria. "I know it was you. You leaked the debt sale to the press. You told the union to strike. You are trying to kill him, Sophia. My father is in the hospital because of you." I examined the sapphires in the mirror. They caught the light beautifully. "Marcus," I said, my voice steady and cool. "Your father is in the hospital because he ate steak for lunch every day for 30 years and ignored his doctor's advice. And your stock is crashing because you ran a public company like a private piggy bank. Do not give me credit for your incompetence." "You are evil," he shouted. "You are a vindictive, jealous woman. You are doing this because I chose Vanessa. You think destroying the company will win me back. You are delusional. I will never come back to you. I hate you." I laughed softly. It was a genuine laugh. He still thought this was about love. He still thought he was the prize. "Oh, Marcus," I said, unclasping the necklace and handing it back to the associate with a nod. "I do not want you back. I am just returning the pain you gave me with interest. And regarding the leak, I didn't have to leak anything. Your fiancée, Vanessa, did a great job of stealing that fake data last night. I assume her father realized the engine designs were flawed about an hour ago. That is probably why King Automotive just issued a press release distancing themselves from you." There was silence on the line. He hadn't seen the press release yet. What he whispered. "Check the news, Marcus," I said, walking out of the jewelry store into the bright sunlight. "King Automotive has suspended all merger talks due to, quote, irregularities in Legacy Motors' R&D data. Vanessa didn't save you. She buried you." "No," he stammered. "That is a lie. She loves me." "She loves a winner, Marcus," I said, signaling for my driver. "And right now you are the biggest loser in Atlanta." I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for his response. I didn't need to hear him cry. I got into the car and opened my laptop. It was time for the final blow. The stock was trading at $2 a share. It was essentially junk status. The board was in chaos. The chairman was in the hospital. The CEO was having a breakdown. I typed out the email from Nemesis Holdings. It was short. It was brutal. It was the only lifeline they had left. To the acting board of Legacy Motors. In light of the catastrophic market devaluation and the cessation of manufacturing operations, Nemesis Holdings is rescinding its offer of a 7-day grace period. The situation has deteriorated beyond the scope of our initial agreement. We are presenting a final non-negotiable offer. Nemesis Holdings will acquire 100% of the outstanding shares of Legacy Motors for a price of $1.50 per share. This acquisition will include all assets, liabilities, and intellectual property. In exchange, we will inject immediate liquidity to restart the factory and settle the outstanding payroll for the striking workers. We will assume the company's debt, shielding the Sterling family from further personal liability lawsuits, which are undoubtedly coming from your angry shareholders. However, there is a condition. The current executive team must resign effective immediately upon signature. You have 1 hour to accept. If you decline, we will file an involuntary bankruptcy petition with the court before the market closes today. In that scenario, the assets will be liquidated piecemeal, and the Sterling family will leave with absolutely nothing. The clock starts now. I hit send. I watch the email fly through the digital ether. It landed in Marcus's inbox at the exact moment he was reading the statement from King Automotive dumping him. He was standing in his office, surrounded by shredders and empty boxes, watching his life burn down. He had 2 choices. He could sign the company over to the anonymous entity known as Nemesis and walk away with a fraction of his dignity. Or he could fight and lose the shirt off his back. I leaned back in the leather seat of the car. I wondered if he would call his father in the hospital. I wondered if he would call Vanessa. But mostly, I wondered what look would be on his face when he walked into the boardroom tomorrow and saw who was sitting at the head of the table. The stock market had closed for the day, but my business was just finished. I told the driver to take me to the St. Regis. I needed to prepare. Tomorrow was going to be a very busy day. The Queen was coming to claim her castle. The conference room on the top floor of the Apex Tower was a fortress of glass and steel, suspended 60 stories above the streets of Atlanta. It was a room designed to intimidate a space where fortunes were made and lives were ruined. I had designed it myself 3 years ago, ensuring that the morning sun hit the head of the table with a blinding intensity while leaving the rest of the room in cool submission. Today, that light was shining on an empty chair, while the 4 people responsible for my misery sat in the shadows waiting for their executioner. I watched them from the security feed in the hallway, adjusting the cuffs of my white Tom Ford suit. It was a masterpiece of tailoring, sharp enough to cut glass and white enough to blind sinners. It was a deliberate choice. In a room full of men in gray suits and women in black morning dresses, I would be the only thing they could see. Inside the room, the atmosphere was suffocating. James sat in his wheelchair, looking small and frail. The heart attack had not killed him, but the loss of his status was slowly finishing the job. He kept wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief that looked gray and wrinkled. Next to him, Marcus was pacing back and forth. His tie loosened, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. He looked exhausted. The arrogance that usually defined his posture was gone, replaced by the jittery energy of a man who knows he is about to lose everything. Vanessa sat at the far end of the table. She was still wearing her engagement ring, but she was not looking at Marcus. She was frantically texting, probably trying to explain to her father why the stolen data was useless. She looked like a rat trying to find a hole in a sinking ship. And then there was Tiffany. Even at the funeral of her family's legacy, she could not help but be herself. She was filing her nails, looking bored, as if this were just another inconvenient appointment she had to endure before she could go back to shopping. They were waiting for the mysterious chairman of Nemesis Holdings. They were waiting to beg for their lives. They were waiting to sign the papers that would turn them into employees in their own company. "It is 10:15, James rasped, his voice weak. "Where are they? This is a power play. They are making us wait on purpose. Maybe they changed their mind," Marcus said, his voice full of desperate hope. "Maybe the offer is off the table. Maybe we can still negotiate." Tiffany scoffed, not looking up from her nails. "Or maybe they just realized you guys are losers and they don't want to buy this dump. I still don't get why we had to come here. I have a facial at noon. Can't we just docu-sign this?" I signaled to my legal team. 5 of the most ruthless corporate attorneys in the state of Georgia straightened their ties. They formed a phalanx behind me, a wall of dark suits to contrast my white armor. "Let's go," I whispered. I began to walk. The hallway was marble and the acoustics were perfect. Click, click, click. My stilettos struck the floor with a rhythmic military precision. It was the sound of approaching doom. Inside the room, I saw their heads turn. They heard the footsteps. They stopped talking. Click, click, click. The sound grew louder, echoing off the glass walls. I wanted them to hear me coming. I wanted them to feel the vibration in their chests. I reached the double doors of frosted glass. My lead attorney reached out and pushed them open. The doors swung wide. I stepped into the room. The effect was instantaneous. The air seemed to leave the space. I stood framed in the doorway, the bright lights of the hallway creating a halo behind me. I walked forward, my gaze fixed straight ahead, not acknowledging them yet. My lawyers fanned out behind me, placing briefcases on the table with synchronized thuds. I walked past Vanessa. She shrank back in her chair, pulling her clutch close to her chest, as if afraid I would snatch it. I walked past James. He squinted at me, his mouth opening slightly, his brain trying to process what his eyes were seeing. I walked past Marcus. He was holding a gold fountain pen ready to sign whatever was put in front of him. When he saw me, the pen slipped from his sweating fingers. It clattered onto the mahogany table, rolling toward the edge, before falling to the floor with a metallic ping. "Sophia," he whispered. The word came out as a breath of pure confusion. I did not stop. I walked all the way to the head of the table, the chairman's seat, the seat that looked out over the entire city, the seat of ultimate power. I stood behind the chair, resting my hands on the leather backrest. The silence in the room was deafening. It was heavy and thick. Then Tiffany broke it. Of course she did. She looked up from her phone, scanning my outfit with a mix of jealousy and confusion. She saw the white suit. She saw the perfect hair. But her brain could not compute the data. She fell back on the only narrative she understood. "Oh my God!" Tiffany laughed, a shrill, nervous sound. "Did you finally get a job? Are you the catering staff? About time you made yourself useful. We have been waiting for 20 minutes. Go get me an oat milk latte and make sure it is hot this time. And get James some water before he passes out." She looked around the table for approval, expecting Marcus and James to join in her mockery. But they were stone silent. They were staring at me with a dawning horror. James began to shake. His eyes moved from my face to the lawyers standing behind me. He recognized one of them. It was Mr. Sterling's own former tax attorney who I had poached a year ago. "Tiffany, shut up," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. "What?" Tiffany asked, rolling her eyes. "She is obviously here to serve drinks. Look at her. She is probably the assistant to the new owner." "Hey, Sophia, tell your boss we are waiting." I smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I pulled the heavy leather chair back. The sound of the chair legs moving on the carpet was the only sound in the world. I walked around the chair and sat down. I crossed my legs. I leaned back. I clasped my hands on the table in front of me, occupying the space that James used to dream of owning. I looked at Tiffany, then I looked at James. Finally, I locked eyes with Marcus. "I don't drink coffee, Tiffany," I said, my voice low and smooth, filling the room with authority. "And I certainly do not serve it." I signaled to my lawyer, who slid a thick black binder across the table. It stopped directly in front of James. The cover was embossed with gold letters. Nemesis Holdings. I watched their faces as the realization hit them like a physical blow. James gasped, clutching his chest again. Vanessa went pale. Tiffany dropped her nail file. Marcus looked like he had been shot. "You?" James wheezed. "Nemesis." "It is. You." I opened the binder. "I am here to accept the handover of my assets," I said calmly. "And gentlemen, you are sitting in my chairs. Here is the detailed script for Part 10, the reveal and the numbers. The content is written in English, formatted specifically for AI voiceover, with a continuous flow, no headers, and focused on emotional delivery." James slammed his fist on the table, causing the water pitcher to wobble dangerously. He looked at the security guard standing by the door. "Johnson, remove this woman immediately. She is trespassing on private property. This is a board meeting for serious business, not a stage for a scorned wife to act out her fantasies. Get her out of here before I call the police." Johnson did not move. He stood with his back to the wall, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes fixed on the middle distance. James turned redder, his voice rising to a shout. "Johnson, are you deaf? I pay your salary. Pay." I said, "Remove her." "Actually, Mr. Sterling, you do not." The voice came from my lead attorney, Mr. Thorne. He stepped forward from the phalanx of suits behind me. He was a tall man with a voice like gravel and a reputation for destroying CEOs. He placed a hand on the back of my chair. "Mr. James Sterling, please lower your voice. The security guard works for the building management, and since Madame Sophia owns the building, Johnson takes his orders from her, not you. Furthermore, regarding the police, I would strongly advise against calling them, unless you want to explain to them why you are currently sitting in a chair owned by your primary creditor." James looked from the lawyer to me, his mouth hanging open. "What kind of trick is this creditor? She is a logistics dispatcher. She packs boxes." "As for the matter of trespassing," Mr. Thorne continued, ignoring James's outburst, "let me be clear. Nemesis Holdings is a sole proprietorship. The sole proprietor is sitting in front of you. Madame Sophia is your creditor, your landlord, and effectively the owner of every paperclip in this room." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush lungs. I watched the color drain from their faces. It was a domino effect of realization. James looked like he was having another heart attack. Marcus looked at me as if I had grown a second head. Vanessa shrank into her seat, trying to make herself invisible. Even Tiffany stopped chewing her gum, her phone hanging limply in her hand. I leaned forward. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. "Close your mouth, James," I said softly. "You look like a fish gasping for air. And honestly, it is undignified for a man who claims to be a captain of industry." Sophia, Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. "This is... You bought the debt? But how... Where did you get $12 million? I ignored his question. I picked up the black binder. It was heavy, filled with the forensic accounting of their failures. I let it drop onto the table. The heavy thud sounded like a gavel sentencing them to prison. "Let us talk business, gentlemen," I said, opening the binder to the first tab. "You brought me here to sign a purchase agreement. You thought you were selling to a stranger who would let you keep your titles and your dignity, but you are selling to me. And I know exactly what this company is worth. And more importantly, I know exactly why it is failing." I looked at Marcus. He flinched. "Marcus Sterling, Director of Sales." I read from the page. "Annual salary $350,000 plus bonuses, a generous package. Yet according to this audit, you have lost 40% of your key accounts in the last 2 quarters. "That is the market," Marcus protested, sitting up straighter. "The economy is down. Everyone is losing clients." "No, Marcus," I corrected him, running my finger down the column of red ink. "Apex Logistics grew by 200% in the same period. Do you want to know why you lost those clients? Because while you were taking Vanessa to 3-hour lunches at the club, your competitors were underbidding you on logistics. Logistics, Marcus. The very thing you told me I was too simple to understand. I turned the page. The sound of the paper turning was sharp in the quiet room. You missed 3 crucial meetings with the Toyota account because you were in Miami for a bachelor party. You approved a pricing structure that undercut your own profit margins because you didn't bother to read the spreadsheet. You are not a victim of the market, Marcus. You are a liability. You are a lazy executive who thought his last name was a substitute for competence. Marcus slumped back in his chair, his face burning with shame. He looked at Vanessa for support, but she was staring at the table, refusing to meet his eyes. "And James," I said, turning my gaze to the head of the table. "The patriarch, the genius." James stiffened, trying to regain some shred of authority. "You have no right to speak to me like that. I built this company from nothing. You built it," I agreed, "and then you decided to eat it." I flipped to the back of the binder. Page 52, line item 7, I read. $2 million transferred from the Employee Pension Fund to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. A shell company that coincidentally paid for your new membership at Augusta and the renovation of your wine cellar. James went pale. That was a loan. A temporary bridge loan. I intended to pay it back. Embezzlement is not a loan, James, I said, my voice cold as ice. You stole from the people who built your cars. You stole from the mechanics and the assembly line workers. You stole their retirement to pay for your ego. And do you know what the worst part is? You did it while telling me I wasn't good enough to sit at your table. I stood up slowly. I walked around the table, my heels clicking on the marble. I stopped behind James's chair. I leaned down close to his ear. You told me for 5 years that business was a man's game. You told me to stick to the warehouse. Well, I did. I learned every nut and bolt of this company while you were busy polishing your image. I know where the bodies are buried, James. I know about the safety inspections you bribed officials to ignore. I know about the toxic waste you dumped illegally to save disposal fees. I straightened up and looked at the group. You called me a gold digger, Tiffany, I asked, looking at the sister-in-law who was now trembling. You called me a charity case. But here is the reality. I am the only person in this room who actually earned her money. You are the parasites. You have been feeding off the corpse of this company for years. Tiffany started to cry. Real ugly tears. But we are family, Sophia. You can't do this. We are family. Family, I laughed. It was a harsh sound. Family doesn't make you wear a maid's uniform at a gala. Family doesn't introduce a mistress as a fiancé on stage. Family doesn't try to evict you onto the street. You are not my family. You are my acquisition. I walked back to the head of the table and looked at the lawyers. Mr. Thorne showed them the options. Mr. Thorne slid 4 documents across the table. Option A, I said. You sign the full surrender of Legacy Motors to Nemesis Holdings. You resign your positions immediately. You walk away with nothing, but you stay out of prison. I will absorb the debt and I will refrain from handing this binder to the FBI. James looked at the document, his hands shaking so hard he could barely hold it. And option B, Marcus whispered. Option B. I smiled. I call the federal prosecutor right now. I hand over the evidence of pension fraud, tax evasion, and corporate negligence. You go to prison for 20 years. And while you are in a cell, I sell the company for scrap metal. I checked my Patek Philippe watch. You have 5 minutes to decide. And gentlemen, I suggest you hurry. My lunch reservation is at 12 and I hate to be late. The room erupted into chaos. James was sobbing, clutching his chest. Marcus was begging. Vanessa was trying to sneak out the door only to be blocked by security. I sat back in my chair and watched them unravel. They had spent years trying to make me feel small. But as I sat there in my white suit watching the mighty Sterling dynasty crumble into dust, I had never felt taller. The warehouse girl had not just arrived, she had taken over, and the view from the top was spectacular. The silence in the boardroom was broken only by the hum of the projector cooling fan as I picked up a remote control from the table. The men were destroyed, but I was not finished. There were 2 other people in this room who had made my life a misery, and it was time for their curtain call. I turned my chair slightly to face Tiffany, who was frantically typing on her phone, likely trying to delete evidence of her lifestyle or perhaps begging her followers for bail money. Tiffany put the phone down, I said, my voice cutting through her panic. You might want to save your battery. You are going to need it to call a very good lawyer. Tiffany looked up, her mascara running down her cheeks in black rivulets. You cannot scare me, Sophia. I am an influencer. I have a platform. If you try to touch me, I will destroy your reputation online. I will tell everyone you bullied me. I pressed a button on the remote. The massive screen behind me descended from the ceiling, blocking out the sun. A spreadsheet appeared, projected in high definition. It was not a boring list of numbers. It was a gallery of theft. Let us look at your contribution to the company, Tiffany, I said, pointing the laser at the screen. Here we have an expense from last month labeled Office Renovation Consultation, $15,000. But when my forensic accountants cross-referenced the merchant code, it was not a contractor. It was the Hermes boutique in Buckhead. I clicked the remote again. A photo of Tiffany posing with a bright orange Birkin bag appeared on the screen. The date of the post matched the date of the transaction perfectly. And here I continued, ignoring her gasp. We have a charge for $40,000 listed as team building retreat. But strangely, the receipt is from the Four Seasons in the Maldives, and the only team members present were you and your sorority sisters. That was for branding, Tiffany shrieked, standing up. I was promoting the Legacy Motors lifestyle. I am a brand ambassador. You are a thief, Tiffany, I corrected her. You used a corporate credit card from a failing company to fund a life you could not afford. That is not branding. That is embezzlement. And since the amount exceeds $100,000 across state lines, it is not just a civil matter. It is a federal crime. I looked toward the door. Mr. Thorne, open the door, please. The heavy glass doors opened, but it was not the catering staff. 2 men in windbreakers walked in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. The windbreakers had 3 yellow letters printed on the back. IRS. Tiffany stopped breathing. She looked at James, but he was staring at the table, too terrified to speak. She looked at Marcus, but he was shaking his head, distancing himself from her. Ms. Tiffany Sterling, the lead agent said, walking around the table. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding tax evasion, wire fraud, and grand larceny. Please stand up and place your hands behind your back. No, Tiffany whispered, backing away until she hit the window. No, you cannot do this. I am famous. I cannot go to jail. Orange does not look good on me. The officers did not care about her color palette. They grabbed her wrists. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp and final. Sophia, please, Tiffany screamed as they began to drag her out. Tell them it was a mistake. I will give the bags back. I will give it all back. I watched her being hauled away, her heels dragging on the carpet she had once told me I wasn't good enough to walk on. Goodbye, Tiffany, I said softly. I hope your followers enjoy the mugshot. The door closed, cutting off her screams. The room felt lighter instantly, but there was one rat left. I turned my attention to the far end of the table. Vanessa King was sitting very still. She had not said a word during Tiffany's arrest. She was clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. She began to slowly rise from her chair. Well, this has been very dramatic, Vanessa said, her voice shaking slightly but trying to maintain an air of superiority. But I really must be going. This seems like a family matter, and since I am not technically family yet, I should leave you to sort this out. Sit down, Vanessa, I commanded. She froze. Excuse me, I said, sit down. You are not going anywhere. Because out of everyone in this room, you are the one who truly underestimated me. Vanessa laughed nervously. I don't know what you mean. I am just Marcus's fiancée. I have nothing to do with the finances. No, I said. You are a corporate spy. And frankly, you are not a very good one. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed. This time it showed a video feed. It was grainy black and white footage from the security camera in James's office. It showed Vanessa clearly slipping the flash drive into the computer. It showed her downloading the files. Vanessa went pale. That proves nothing, she stammered. I was just checking my email. You were stealing Project Phoenix, I said. You were stealing the electric motor designs to give to your father. You thought you were being so clever. You thought you were stealing the future of Legacy Motors. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. But here is the thing, Vanessa. I knew you were coming. I knew what you were after. So I let you take it. But the files you downloaded, they were not the real designs. They were a little gift I prepared just for you. I call it the poison apple. Vanessa stared at me, her eyes wide with confusion. What did you do? I altered the thermal regulation code, I explained. It looks perfect in simulation. But if anyone tries to build a prototype and run it at full power, the battery feedback loop will overload instantly. Vanessa stood up, knocking her chair over. You are lying. My father's engineers are testing the prototype this morning. They are running the first live diagnostic right now. I smiled, checking my watch. Then right about now they should be hitting 3,000 RPM. As if on cue, Vanessa's phone began to ring. It was a harsh, jarring sound in the quiet room. The caller ID flashed on the screen. Daddy. Answer it, Vanessa, I said. I think he wants to give you a performance review. She picked up the phone with trembling hands. She put it to her ear. Daddy, she whispered. She pulled the phone away almost instantly. Even from where I sat, I could hear the screaming on the other end. It was a man's voice filled with rage. You stupid girl! The voice shouted loud enough for Marcus to hear. You destroyed the lab! The prototype exploded. 3 technicians are injured. The fire suppression system ruined millions of dollars of equipment. Daddy, I didn't know, Vanessa sobbed. You didn't know. You told me the data was verified. You told me we had them, the voice roared. Do you know what you have done? The SEC is already asking questions about why we were testing undocumented technology. You have exposed us to criminal liability. Daddy, please help me. Vanessa begged, tears streaming down her face. Sophia knows. She set me up. Don't you call me Dad, the voice hissed. You are a liability, Vanessa. You are incompetent. Do not come to the office. Do not come to the house. You are on your own. Fix this or don't bother coming back. The line went dead. Vanessa lowered the phone slowly. She looked like a ghost. She looked at Marcus, but he was staring at her with pure horror, realizing finally that the woman he left me for was not a savior, but a saboteur. Marcus, say something. Vanessa whispered, reaching out a hand toward him. Marcus recoiled as if she were contagious. You stole from us, he asked, his voice hollow. You were stealing the designs the whole time. I didn't mean for it to explode, Vanessa cried. I did it for us, Marcus. I cleared my throat. The sound snapped their attention back to me. Actually, she did it for herself, I said. But thank you, Vanessa. Your little act of espionage just saved me a lot of money. I don't have to sue King Automotive now. They just blew up their own laboratory. I think that is punishment enough. I pointed to the door. Security escort Ms. King out of the building, and make sure you check her purse for any other flash drives. We wouldn't want her taking any office supplies. 2 guards stepped forward. They didn't need to drag her. Vanessa was broken. She walked out like a zombie, her expensive heels clicking a funeral march on the marble. She had lost her family, her fiancé, and her reputation in the span of 5 minutes. The door closed again. Now there were just 3 of us, me, James, and Marcus, the Sterling men. I looked at them. They sat in the wreckage of their lives, surrounded by empty chairs and the echoes of the women who had helped them destroy themselves. Well, gentlemen, I said, closing the black binder with a satisfying thud. The distractions are gone. The drama queens have left the building. Now it is just us. And I believe we have some paperwork to sign. Unless, of course, you prefer option B. James reached for the pen with a shaking hand. He didn't say a word. He just signed his name, surrendering his legacy to the girl he once told to use the back door. Marcus followed suit, weeping silently as he signed away his birthright. It was over. The queens were off the board. The kings were captured, and I had won the game without ever raising my voice. Here is the detailed script for Part 12, The Fate of James and Marcus. The content is written in English formatted specifically for AI voiceover, with a continuous flow, no headers, and focused on emotional delivery. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving only 3 of us in the cavernous boardroom. The air was thick with the smell of fear and expensive cologne that had turned sour. The women who had amplified their egos were gone, and now James and Marcus sat before me stripped of their defenses. They looked like kings who had just realized their castle was built on sand, and the tide was coming in fast. James looked at the pen in his hand. It was a Mont Blanc fountain pen that I had bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. He had never used it until now. He looked up at me, and for the first time in his life, I saw tears in his eyes. They were not tears of remorse, but tears of a man mourning his own power. "Sophia, please," James croaked, his voice breaking. "We are family. I know I have been hard on you. I know I have expected a lot. But you cannot do this. You cannot destroy your own name. Marcus is your husband. I am his father. Doesn't that mean anything to you? We can work this out. We can be partners." I stared at him. I let the silence stretch out until it became uncomfortable. I wanted him to hear his own hypocrisy ringing in his ears. "Partners?" I asked softly. "It is funny you use that word, James. Because just last week, on a stage in front of 500 of Atlanta's elite, you told the world that I was a mistake. You said I was a distraction. You said I was not part of the Sterling legacy. You publicly erased me from this family to sell your son to a rival. So do not sit there and appeal to a bond that you severed with a microphone and a spotlight." James flinched as if I had slapped him, but I was not done. However, I continued, leaning back in the leather executive chair that fit me perfectly. "I am a businesswoman, and I realize that firing the founder of the company on the first day of the acquisition might spook the shareholders. It might cause volatility in the market, and as the sole owner, I want stability. So I have decided to be benevolent. I am not going to fire you, James." Hope flickered in his eyes. A pathetic, desperate hope. "Thank you, Sophia. I knew you were reasonable. I can stay on as chairman. I can guide the transition." "No," I said, cutting him off. "The role of chairman requires vision and integrity, neither of which you possess. You are stepping down as chairman, effective immediately. However, I am appointing you to a new role. You will be the honorary advisor emeritus." Advisor, James asked, sitting up straighter. "That sounds respectable. What are the duties?" "There are none," I said coldly. "You will have no vote. You will have no budget. You will have no direct reports. We are removing the computer from your office because, frankly, you don't know how to use it anyway. We are disconnecting your phone line. You will come in at 9 and leave at 5. You will sit in your glass office and wave at the people who are actually doing the work. You are a museum exhibit, James, a relic of a failed era. You are there to remind everyone of what not to be." James slumped back, his face turning gray. "You are making me a mascot. You are humiliating me. I am giving you a salary and health insurance," I countered, "which is more than you gave the employees whose pension fund you raided. Take it or leave it." I turned my eyes to Marcus. He had been staring at the table, terrified to speak. When my gaze landed on him, he jumped. "And you, Marcus," I said, "my loving husband, the man who stood on a stage and held another woman's hand while I served him appetizers." "Sophia." "I am sorry," Marcus blurted out. "I was weak. Dad pressured me. Vanessa manipulated me. I never stopped loving you. I can fix this. I can go back to being sales director. I will work harder. I will win back the clients. Just give me a chance to prove I am worthy of you. Oh, I am going to give you a chance. I smiled. But not in sales. You see, Marcus, looking at the audit, you are terrible at sales. You are charming, but you are lazy. You don't understand the product and you don't respect the process. But I remember you saying something to me once. You told me that my job at the warehouse was unskilled labor. You said anyone could pack a box or drive a forklift. You said it was beneath a sterling. Marcus swallowed hard. His eyes widened. I think it is time you learned exactly how hard that unskilled labor is, I said. I am removing you from the executive floor. Effective tomorrow morning, you are the new junior logistics clerk in the warehouse. The warehouse. Marcus gasped. Sophia, you can't be serious. It is 90 degrees in there. I have a bad back. I can't lift boxes. I am a sterling. You are an employee, I corrected him. You will report to the loading dock manager at 6 a.m. sharp. You will wear the neon safety vest. You will scan inventory. You will load trucks. And Marcus, you will earn the exact same hourly wage that I earned when I was supporting us while you played golf. $15 an hour. No. Marcus stood up, slamming his hands on the table. I won't do it. This is insanity. I will quit. I will walk out of here right now and sue you for spousal abuse. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh because his entitlement was so absurd. Go ahead, Marcus, I said, gesturing to the door. Walk out. But before you do, let us remember option B. I tapped the black binder on the table. Inside this binder is proof of 12 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, and gross corporate negligence. You signed the papers, Marcus. You signed the false financial statements. You signed the transfer orders for the pension funds. If you walk out that door as an unemployed civilian, I have a fiduciary duty to report these crimes to the Department of Justice. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. Do you know what happens in federal prison, Marcus? It is not like the country club. The beds are hard, the food is terrible, and nobody cares who your father is. The sentence for the amount of money you stole is roughly 20 years. Marcus froze. He looked at the door, then he looked at me. The reality crashed down on him. He was trapped. So I asked, what will it be, gentlemen? Will you accept your new positions in the company you destroyed, or should I call the U.S. attorney and have him meet you in the lobby with handcuffs? James picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He signed the employment contract accepting his role as a powerless figurehead. He looked broken, a king reduced to a jester. Marcus looked at me one last time, pleading with his eyes. Sophia, please, don't make me do this. 6 a.m. Marcus, I said, cold as stone. Don't be late. We dock pay for tardiness. Marcus picked up the pen. He cried as he signed. Tears dropped onto the paper, smearing the ink. He was signing away his pride, his freedom, and his ego. He was now the lowest-ranking employee in the company he thought he would inherit. I stood up and smoothed my white suit. I did not say goodbye. I did not offer a handshake. I simply turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. They wanted to keep the company in the family. Well, they got their wish. They were working for the family now. They were working for me. Here is the detailed script for Part 13, the first day of work. The content is written in English, formatted specifically for AI voiceover, with a continuous flow, no headers, and focused on emotional delivery. The warehouse of Legacy Motors was a beast that breathed diesel fumes and exhaled heat. It was a sprawling cavern of concrete and steel, where the temperature consistently hovered 10 degrees higher than the world outside. For 5 years, this had been my kingdom. I knew the rhythm of the conveyor belts and the song of the forklifts better than I knew the sound of my own heartbeat. But today, the warehouse felt different. Today, it was not my prison. It was my courtroom, and the sentencing had just begun. I stood on the catwalk overlooking the main floor, flanked by a delegation of executives from Tokyo who were considering a massive distribution contract. They were impressed by the automation I had implemented, but I was barely listening to their praise. My eyes were fixed on aisle 4, specifically on the loading dock, where a new employee was struggling to lift a crate of alternators. Employee number 452. Marcus Sterling looked like a man who had been dropped onto an alien planet. The neon orange safety vest hung loosely on his frame, a stark contrast to the tailored Italian suits he had worn for the last decade. His face, usually smooth and composed, was slick with sweat and grime. His hair, which he used to spend 20 minutes styling every morning, was plastered to his forehead. He was gasping for air, his chest heaving as he tried to keep pace with the conveyor belt. I watched as he fumbled with a scanner gun. His hands, which had never lifted anything heavier than a golf club, were shaking. He dropped the scanner. It clattered onto the concrete floor. "Pick it up, Sterling," the shift supervisor yelled. It was Mr. Vance, a man who had once written me up for being 2 minutes late because my car broke down. Now he was barking orders at the former heir to the company. "You are slowing down the line. We have quotas to meet." I saw Marcus flinch. He bent down to retrieve the scanner, his movements stiff and painful. He looked miserable. He looked broken. And for a moment, just a fleeting second, I remembered how it felt. I remembered the blisters. I remembered the backaches. I remembered coming home to a husband who complained that his dinner wasn't hot enough while I could barely stand up. But that memory did not bring pity. It brought satisfaction. "Shall we go down to the floor?" I asked the Japanese delegation in fluent Japanese. "I want to show you the efficiency of our shipping department." We took the freight elevator down. As the doors opened, the wall of noise hit us. The clanking of metal, the beeping of reversing trucks, the shouting of men at work. I walked through the chaos like a ghost in a white hard hat, my heels clicking a sharp staccato on the concrete. The workers parted for me. They knew who I was. They knew I was the one who had saved their jobs and their pensions. They nodded with respect, a respect they had never shown James or Marcus. We moved down the central aisle. I pointed out the new sorting algorithms and the robotic arms, explaining the metrics of our turnaround time. The investors were nodding, taking notes. Then we reached aisle 4. Marcus was bent over a pallet, struggling to wrap it in plastic sheeting. He was tangling himself in the material, cursing under his breath. He looked up when he saw the group approaching. When his eyes locked onto mine, time seemed to stop. He dropped the roll of plastic. "Sophia," he breathed. He took a step towards me. He looked pathetic. There was grease on his cheek and a rip in his pants. He looked at me not as his boss, but as his wife, as his savior. He thought that seeing him like this would break me. He thought I would rush over, wipe his brow, and tell him it was all a bad dream. I did not stop walking. I did not smile. I continued talking to Mr. Tanaka, the lead investor, pointing to a shelf of inventory just above Marcus's head. "And here we utilize a first-in, first-out system to minimize depreciation," I said, my voice cool and professional. "Sophia, wait!" Marcus stepped into my path, blocking the aisle. The investors stopped, looking confused. Mr. Vance rushed over, looking terrified that his subordinate was harassing the owner. "Sterling, get back to your station," Vance shouted. "No, wait!" Marcus pleaded, ignoring his supervisor. He looked at me, his eyes filling with desperate tears. "Sophia, please, we need to talk. Look at me. I can't do this. My back is killing me. I think I pulled a muscle. This is inhumane. I am sorry." "Okay," I said, "I was sorry. Just let me go back to the office. I will do anything." I stopped. The entire warehouse seemed to go silent. Hundreds of eyes were watching. The workers, the investors, the managers. They were all waiting to see if the Iron Queen would melt. I slowly turned my head to look at him. I looked at the sweat dripping off his nose. I looked at his blistered hands. I looked at the man who had told me my job was unskilled labor. "I beg your pardon," I said in English, my voice cutting through the humid air like a blade. "Do I know you?" Marcus recoiled as if I had struck him. "Sophia, stop it. It is me. Marcus, your husband. I see no husband here, I said, taking a step closer until I was looming over him. I see a junior logistics clerk who is currently wasting company time. Sophia, please, Marcus sobbed, reaching out to touch my arm. Do not touch me, I snapped, recoiling from his dirty hand. I turned to Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance, why is this employee not wearing his back brace? It is a mandatory safety requirement for lifting loads over 50 pounds. He refused to wear it, Ma'am Vance stammered. He said it was uncomfortable. Write him up, I said coldly. First warning, 3 strikes and we terminate for cause. And Mr. Vance? Yes, ma'am, check his scan rate. If he is below the department average by the end of the shift, dock his pay. We do not pay for mediocrity at Legacy Motors. Marcus stared at me, his mouth hanging open. The realization was finally sinking in. There was no mercy here. There was no special treatment. He was just a number in a system he used to own. Sophia. How can you be so cruel? He whispered. I leaned in close, so only he could hear. Cruel, I whispered back. Cruel is watching your wife scrub floors to pay your debts while you buy jewelry for another woman. Cruel is telling the world, I am nothing. This is just work, Marcus. It is what you told me I was born to do, so do it. I straightened up and turned back to the investors who were watching with wide eyes. Apologies for the interruption, gentlemen, I said, flashing a charming smile. As I was saying, our quality control is rigorous. We identify weak links in the chain, and we correct them immediately. I walked past Marcus without a backward glance. Behind me, I heard Mr. Vance's voice booming. You heard the boss, Sterling, pick up that plastic and put on the brace. You have 400 boxes left to wrap before lunch. I heard the sound of plastic rustling. I heard Marcus trying to stifle a sob. I kept walking. My heels clicked on the concrete, a rhythm of absolute victory. I did not feel guilt. I did not feel sadness. I felt the immense power of balance restored. Marcus Sterling was finally learning the value of $1, and I was going to make sure he earned every single cent. 30 days is a long time in the world of business, but it is an eternity in the world of high society. I sat in the back of my chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce, looking down at the glossy magazine resting on my lap. It was the latest issue of Forbes, and staring back at me from the cover was a woman in a sharp white suit with eyes that held 1,000 secrets. The headline was bold and impossible to ignore. The Silent Architect: How Sophia Sterling Built a Logistics Empire in the Shadows. It was strange seeing my face like that. For 5 years I had trained myself to be invisible. I had learned to shrink to make myself smaller so that Marcus and James could feel big. I had learned to wear beige and gray to blend into the background. But the woman on the cover was not blending in. She was demanding attention. She looked powerful. She looked dangerous. She looked free. My phone buzzed on the leather seat next to me. It had been buzzing non-stop for 3 weeks. I picked it up and scrolled through the notifications. The screen was a graveyard of hypocrisy. There was a text message from Mrs. Vanderbilt, the woman who had laughed when Tiffany spilled wine on me at the gala. Dearest Sophia, the text read, followed by 3 heart emojis. I just saw the Forbes cover. Absolutely stunning. We are hosting a charity luncheon for the Botanical Gardens next week, and simply must have you as our guest of honor. We have always admired your quiet strength. Love, Eleanor. I laughed softly. Always admired my quiet strength. A month ago she had asked me to fetch her a napkin because she thought I was a waitress. Now I was her dearest Sophia. I swiped the message away without replying. Then came the emails. Dozens of them. Invitations to gallery openings. Requests for coffee from investors who had ignored my calls for years. Flowers had been arriving at my office by the truckload. My reception area looked like a funeral parlor for the reputation of Atlanta's elite. They were terrified. They knew that I held the keys to the city now, They knew that Legacy Motors was just one piece of my portfolio, and they were scrambling to get on my good side before I decided to buy their debts too. The car slowed to a halt in front of La Lumière. I looked out the window. The paparazzi were waiting. A month ago I could have walked down this street naked, and nobody would have looked twice. Now cameras flashed as soon as the driver opened my door. I stepped out, putting on my sunglasses not to hide my eyes, but to hide my amusement. I walked past them, ignoring the shouted questions about my hostile takeover and my disgraced husband. I walked into the restaurant, my restaurant, and the maitre d' bowed lower than he ever had before. "Your table is ready." "Madame Sterling," he said. "Mr. Julian Hayes is already waiting." I felt a small flutter in my stomach. It was a sensation I had not felt in years. Julian Hayes was the CEO of Green Horizon Energy. He was a visionary in the renewable sector, a man who had built wind farms in the North Sea and solar grids in the Sahara. We were meeting to discuss a potential partnership to electrify my trucking fleet. But I would be lying if I said I was only interested in his batteries. I walked to the private booth in the back. Julian stood up the moment he saw me. He did not wait for me to reach the table. He stepped out to meet me halfway. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his navy suit perfectly. He had skin the color of deep mahogany and eyes that were warm and intelligent. He did not look at me with that predatory gaze I was used to from men in this city. He looked at me with something far more dangerous. "Respect." "Sophia," he said, extending his hand. "It is an honor to finally meet the woman who is terrorizing the old guard of Atlanta." I shook his hand. His grip was firm but gentle. "Please call me Sophia. The terrorizing is just a hobby. Logistics is my job." He laughed. It was a rich, deep sound that made the other diners turn their heads. He pulled out my chair for me, not in a performative way, but in a way that felt natural. As we sat down, he poured the water. He did not wait for the waiter. He served me. "I have to admit," Julian said, leaning forward. "I read the Forbes article twice. The way you restructured the debt leverage on Legacy Motors was a masterclass. Most people would have just liquidated the assets. But you kept the factory running. You saved 300 jobs." "It was efficient," I said, taking a sip of water. "Liquidating would have yielded a short-term gain, but a long-term loss in manufacturing capability. Plus, I enjoy the irony of making the Sterling men work for the workers they tried to rob." Julian smiled, and for a second I forgot about the business agenda. "I heard about that," he said. "Putting your ex-husband in the warehouse. That is poetic justice. But tell me, Sophia, does he actually wrap the pallets correctly?" I smiled back. "He is learning. His scan rate is up by 2% this week. If he keeps improving, he might get a raise next year. 50 cents an hour." Julian shook his head, looking at me with admiration. "You are incredible. You know, I meet a lot of powerful people in this industry. Men who inherit their empires. Men who think shouting is leading. But you built this in silence while surrounded by noise. That takes a level of discipline I have rarely seen." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. It was not shame this time. It was validation. For 5 years, Marcus had told me I was boring. He told me I was too serious. He told me I didn't know how to have fun. But here was a man who saw my seriousness as a superpower. We ordered lunch. We talked about lithium-ion batteries and supply chain integration. We talked about the future of automation. I found myself speaking freely, not dumbing down my vocabulary, not hiding my ambition. Julian listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't explain my own business to me. He asked questions. He challenged my assumptions. He treated me like an intellectual equal. Midway through the meal, he put his fork down and looked at me intensely. "Sophia, can I ask you a personal question?" I hesitated. "Go ahead." "Why did you stay?" he asked. "With your talent, with your brilliance, why did you stay in the shadows for so long? Why did you let them treat you like that?" I looked down at my glass. It was the question I had asked myself 1,000 times. "Because I thought love was about sacrifice," I said softly. I thought if I made myself smaller, he would feel bigger, and that would make him happy. I thought that was what a good wife did. And now Julian asked softly, "Now I know that a man who requires you to be small is a small man," I said, meeting his gaze. Julian reached across the table. He didn't touch my hand, but he let his hand rest near mine, a gesture of support. "Well, I can tell you this, Sophia," he said, his voice low and magnetic. "I do not scare easily, and I have never been intimidated by a woman who knows her worth. In fact, I find it incredibly attractive." The air between us crackled. It was electric. It was the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time. My phone buzzed on the table, breaking the moment. I glanced at the screen. It was a notification from the warehouse management system, an alert about a bottleneck in the loading dock. I sighed. Duty calls. Julian signaled for the check. He didn't fight me for it. He didn't try to prove his masculinity by paying. He simply handed his card to the waiter and said, "My treat next time is on you, partner." Partner. I liked the sound of that. We walked out of the restaurant together. The paparazzi were still there, but I didn't care. Julian walked beside me, matching my stride. He walked on the street side, shielding me from the traffic. When the valet brought my car around, Julian opened the door for me. "Thank you for lunch, Julian," I said. "I will have my team send over the battery specs tomorrow." "Forget the specs," Julian said, leaning in the open window. "I want to see you again, and not to talk about trucks. I want to take you to dinner, real dinner, somewhere without cameras, somewhere we can talk about something other than business." I looked at him. I saw kindness. I saw strength. I saw a man who had built his own empire and was looking for a queen, not a servant. "I would like that," I said. "I will call you," he said. "And Sophia?" "Yes." "Wear that white suit again. It suits you." I drove away, feeling a smile spread across my face that I couldn't control. I looked in the rearview mirror. The woman from the Forbes cover was looking back at me, but she didn't look hard anymore. She looked hopeful. I drove past the turnoff for the warehouse. I didn't need to go check on Marcus. He was just an employee now, a ghost from a past life. I had a company to run. I had an empire to build. And for the first time in a long time, I had a date on Friday night. The billionaire life was not just about the money. It was about the freedom to choose who sat at your table. And my table was finally surrounded by people who deserved to be there. Here is the detailed script for Part 15, the final phone call. The content is written in English, formatted specifically for AI voiceover, with a continuous flow, no headers, and focused on emotional delivery. The Indian Ocean is a shade of turquoise that looks almost fake when you see it in photographs. It is the kind of blue that Tiffany used to pin to her vision board, the kind of paradise she claimed was her spiritual home, even though she had never left the country. It is ironic that I am sitting here on the terrace of the most exclusive private villa in Uluwatu, drinking a passion fruit martini while the people who thought they were better than me are likely waking up to a cold gray morning in Atlanta. I stretched my legs out on the lounge chair, listening to the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the cliffs below. The air smelled of salt and frangipani. For the last 48 hours, I had done something I had not done in 10 years. I had disconnected. No emails, no stock tickers, no logistics reports, and most importantly, no phone. My device sat on the teak table next to me like a dormant grenade. It was sleek black and silent. I had turned it off the moment the Gulfstream jet wheels left the tarmac in Georgia. I needed the silence. I needed to wash the stench of the warehouse and the boardroom off my skin. But I knew the peace could not last forever. In the world of business, silence is a luxury, but information is power. And I was curious to see just how desperate the Sterling family had become. I reached out and picked up the phone. The metal was warm from the tropical sun. I held down the power button. The screen flared to life with the Apple logo. It took a moment to boot up, searching for a signal across the ocean. Then the floodgates opened. The phone vibrated violently in my hand. It buzzed and danced across the table as the notifications cascaded in. A digital avalanche of panic. Ping, ping, ping. I watched the counter on the phone icon climb. It ticked up past 50, past 100, past 200. It finally stopped at 235 missed calls. 235 times the Sterling family had tried to reach out and pull me back into their drowning ship. I scrolled through the log. 100 calls were from James. I could only imagine the voicemail transcripts. He was probably calling to complain that the air conditioning in his glass office was too cold, or that the security guard didn't salute him with enough enthusiasm. He was likely realizing that being an honorary advisor meant he had to sit in a room and watch his former employees ignore him all day. He wanted his mansion back. He wanted his dignity back. He wanted the daughter-in-law he used to silence to come and fix his life. 50 calls were from cousins and distant relatives, the vultures, the people who had snubbed me at the wedding because I didn't have a famous last name. Now that they had seen the Forbes cover, now that they knew I controlled the family purse strings, they suddenly wanted to reconnect. They wanted loans, they wanted jobs, they wanted to remind me how much they had always loved me. And then there were the calls from Marcus, 50 of them. The timestamps showed he had been calling at all hours, during his lunch break at the warehouse, late at night when his back was aching from lifting boxes, early in the morning before his shift started. I looked at his name on the screen. Husband. I had not changed the contact name yet. It felt like a relic from a past life. Just as I was about to put the phone down, it lit up again. Call number 236. The picture of Marcus flashed on the screen. It was an old photo one where he looked happy and arrogant wearing a tuxedo at a gala. It looked nothing like the broken man in the orange safety vest I had seen last week. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I took a sip of my cocktail, letting the condensation cool my fingertips. I looked out at the endless horizon. I did not need to answer. I was free. I was rich. I was loved by a man named Julian who was flying out to join me tomorrow. But closure is a powerful drug. And I wanted one last hit. I swiped the green button and lifted the phone to my ear. I did not say anything. I just listened to the sound of his breathing. It was ragged and desperate. Sophia Marcus's voice cracked. He sounded like he had been crying. "Oh God, Sophia, thank you. Thank you for picking up. I have been calling for 2 days. I thought you blocked me. I thought you were dead." "I am very much alive, Marcus," I said, my voice calm and steady, matching the rhythm of the ocean. "I am in Bali. It is beautiful here. You should tell Tiffany. The lighting is perfect for selfies." Bali. Marcus let out a choked laugh. "You are in Bali while I am in hell. Sophia, listen to me. You have to stop this. I can't do it anymore. My hands are bleeding. My back has seized up. Mr. Vance wrote me up again today because I dropped a crate. They are threatening to fire me, Sophia. Your managers are monsters." "They are efficient, Marcus," I corrected him. "They are holding you to the same standard you held your employees to for years. It is called accountability." "Screw accountability," Marcus shouted, his voice echoing in what sounded like a small empty room. "I am your husband. Doesn't that mean anything? I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but this punishment, it is sadistic. I have learned my lesson. Okay, I am humble now. I get it. Please, Sophia, I miss you." He paused, and for a second I thought he might actually be sincere. "I love you, Sophia," he whispered. "I never stopped. Vanessa was a mistake. She was just a shiny object. You are my rock. You are the only real thing in my life. Please come back. Please give me another chance. Not for the company, not for the money, but for us." I closed my eyes. 5 years ago, those words would have melted me. 5 years ago, I would have flown home and fixed everything. But the woman who would have done that was dead. She died the night he stood on that stage and held another woman's hand. "You love me?" I asked softly. "Yes," Marcus cried. Yes, I do. Or do you love the fact that I'm the only person who can save you from a minimum wage life, I asked. Do you love me or do you love the chairman's seat? I love you, he insisted. That is unfortunate, I said, opening my eyes and watching a seagull dive into the water. Because I have some news, Marcus, and since you are an employee of Legacy Motors, I suppose you should hear it from the owner first. What news? He asked, his voice trembling with a new kind of fear. I sold the company, I said. There was a silence so profound, I could hear the static on the line. You what? I sold Legacy Motors this morning? I continued, swirling the ice in my glass. The paperwork was finalized an hour ago. I sold 100% of the shares to the Dragon Capital Group. Dragon Capital, Marcus whispered. The Chinese conglomerate, Sophia. They are butchers. They buy distressed companies and strip them for parts. I know, I said. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. 3 times the valuation. It was a brilliant exit strategy. But what about the employees? Marcus stammered. What about Dad? What about me? That is the best part, I said, a smile spreading across my face. Dragon Capital has a very strict policy. They bring in their own management. They bring in their own advisors. They don't believe in honorary titles for failed chairmen. And they certainly don't employ junior clerks with bad backs and expensive tastes. Sophia, no. They are liquidating the workforce tomorrow, Marcus, I said, checking my watch. The email should be hitting your inbox any second now. Your father is fired. You are fired. The warehouse is being shut down and the inventory is being moved to Shenzhen. You can't do this, Marcus screamed. You promised. You said we could work for you. You said we had jobs. I said you had jobs as long as I owned the company. I replied. I don't own it anymore. I am just a private citizen enjoying a vacation. Sophia, please, you have to stop the sale. We will be destitute. Dad has nothing. I have nothing. You have your experience, Marcus, I said, my voice turning cold as the ice in my glass. You have a whole week of experience as a logistics clerk. I am sure you can put that on your resume. Good luck finding a new job, ex-husband. Sophia. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I could still hear his tiny, tinny voice screaming my name, screaming for a salvation that was never coming. I looked at the black device in my hand. It contained the last remnants of my old life. The pain, the betrayal, the desperate need for approval. I didn't press the end call button. That would be too intimate. Instead, I leaned over the edge of the terrace. Below me, the pool shimmered a deep, inviting blue. Goodbye, Marcus, I whispered. I opened my hand. The phone tumbled through the air, turning end over end. It hit the water with a satisfying splash, sinking rapidly to the bottom of the deep end. The screen flickered once, glowing through the water, and then went black. Silence returned to the terrace. I picked up my martini and took a long, slow sip. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see the villa staff bringing out a tray of fresh fruit. They smiled at me, bowing respectfully. Is there anything else you need, Madame? The server asked. I looked at the empty table where the phone used to be. I looked at the horizon where my future was waiting. No, I said, smiling. I have everything I need. I turned back to the ocean and watched the sun go down on the Sterling Empire. It was the most beautiful sunset I had ever seen. The most powerful lesson from Sophia's journey is that silence is not weakness. It is a strategy. While her husband's family focused on appearances and titles, Sophia focused on building a legacy. Her story reminds us that true power doesn't need to shout to be heard. When people underestimate you, don't waste energy arguing with them. Let them believe what they want while you work in the shadows. Eventually the tables will turn, and your success will make the noise for you. Never let anyone's inability to see your value cause you to doubt your own. If you believe that success is the best revenge, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.